Hi again, welcome back inside the Tier 4 studio here in Morgantown, West Virginia. For the Charleston Gazette-Mail, I'm Mike Casazza, and this is part 9 of our 2015 and 15 countdown, getting you ready for the 2015 football season at West Virginia University. Today, my Iron Man streak, if you will, continues as we have a look at the schedule awaiting the Mountaineers, who, you should be reminded, begin preseason practice August 3rd. If you ask me, and you did because you pressed play, it is a wild and wonderful arrangement of games. I know that might be unusual. Not a lot of people think the same about this schedule. I might also be in charge of a 15-part series, but I might also be right. So try and follow me for a couple of minutes here as I share with you some interesting, important, intriguing elements of this schedule. We'll begin with the obvious. It's a 7-game home schedule. That is not a guarantee moving forward. It's probably even a rarity. The reason being, the new normal in the college football playoff, you'll see ambitious non-conference schedules. You see teams like Baylor getting hammered for who they do and do not play, and you see more and more now that schools don't want to be considered in the same sentences. So, when teams like West Virginia have 3 non-conference games, they'll play 1 away from home as part of a series against a power conference team. They'll play a one-off game at a neutral site against a power conference team. That means less games at home, which means fewer of these 7 home game seasons in those odd number years where West Virginia has just the 4 conference home games in Big 12 play. In the regular season, though, it begins at Georgia Southern. If you're not familiar with Coach Willie Fritz and his offense at Georgia Southern, you better do so in a hurry. They're exciting, they're effective, they're probably scary, maybe not so much at the beginning of the season where you have so much of the offseason to prepare. But last season, Georgia Southern's first season at the FBS level, while the former FCS power went 8-0, won the Sun Belt Conference. This season, now the favorite in the Sun Belt, because the offense is loaded with a ton of returning talent and productivity, a few holes on the offensive line. But a year ago, with all those players in the fold, led the nation in rushing yardage per game. And not only that, the per game average was the highest in the country this century. How do they do it? It's a multiple, bizarre, hodgepodge offense. You'll see triple option principles, you'll see veer, you'll see read, you'll see single wing, and you'll see it out of the shotgun and the pistol. Most of the time, these formations you would not consider to be connected with running the football as effectively. This is what Georgia Southern does. Week 2, a bit of a change, a step down at the FCS level, and Turner Gill's team at Liberty. This is going to be a spread passing offense, much different than what the Mountaineers will see the week before. Turner Gill's done a nice job so far at Liberty, and that school is putting a lot of money into the football program, but their time is coming and probably won't be in the second week of the season. If you believe that most of the improvement early in the season happens between Game 1 and Game 2, well, that's good news. West Virginia has an open week in Week 3. Here's the funny part about that. Only 4 teams in the entire country among the power conferences have 2 open weeks this season. West Virginia, Kansas State, Texas, and Baylor. There are also Big 12 teams. The Big 12, you might have heard, doesn't have a conference championship game. So in that final week in the season, the first weekend of December, when teams are playing their conference championship games, well, West Virginia will be playing Kansas State. Texas will be playing Baylor. And the rest of the Big 12 will be at home with the coaches going around the country recruiting and gaining a significant advantage there. It means a lot to those coaches. It might also mean much to those teams that don't play and thus can't impress the college football playoff committee. So, after the open week, West Virginia plays Maryland, a home game rivalry, don't have to tell you much about that. Then West Virginia goes at Oklahoma. It will be brutally hot, whether it's a day game or a night game. Norman, that time of year, it's sweltering. Here's what's also interesting. The only team that has an open week before playing West Virginia this year, Oklahoma. I think that who teams play before playing West Virginia is also interesting this season. Oklahoma State plays at Texas and at Kansas State before seeing the Mountaineers. Those are 2 very physical teams, and so is West Virginia. How will Oklahoma State be after playing Texas and Kansas State? Some other interesting precursors to playing West Virginia. Baylor, Texas, and Kansas State play Kansas before playing West Virginia. TCU plays Iowa State before playing West Virginia. West Virginia also plays back-to-back on the road at Baylor, at TCU. Doesn't happen very often in the Big 12. The conference tries to avoid situations like that, especially with West Virginia and making them go to Texas in back-to-back weeks. However, West Virginia has its second open week between Baylor and TCU because the TCU game is Thursday night. If you want some time before a big game, that is certainly conducive. Other times there are back-to-back road games or at least games away from home. Well, it also involves West Virginia. Baylor plays Texas Tech in Dallas and at Kansas before playing West Virginia. Iowa State plays at Kansas State and then at West Virginia. Then you get into the final part of the season and the late season swoons that have so far defined Dana Holgerson's time in the Big 12. 2-3, 1-3, 1-3 in those November games in his time in the conference. That's not going to be a very good result this year because these games at the end aren't quite as difficult. Home against Texas Tech, home against Texas, at Kansas, home against Iowa State, at Kansas State. Kansas State, always going to be a tough game, especially at the end of the season, but look at the rankings in the preseason poll for those teams. Texas Tech is 8, Texas is 5, Kansas is 10, Iowa State's 9, Kansas State is 7. You're not going to find any of the top 4 teams in there because West Virginia has all of them out of the way before November. On top of that, TCU, Baylor, Oklahoma, and Oklahoma State all play one another not before November. You might see some significant shifting in the standings in that final month, and for a team like West Virginia that has already played the top teams and then plays the bottom at the end, it could be fortuitous for them and their final positioning. So there you have it on the schedule. Probably more interesting than you think, hopefully more intriguing than you thought before. That's all for this time. I'll see you next time for the Charleston Gazette Mail. I'm Mike Casazza.